It's so wonderful to meet you. And I've pre-recorded your introduction for, the sake of time and the interest of time. But I did just want to say one personal statement to you, if I may, before we begin.
Of course.
I wrote it down. This is easily, thus far, the most thrilling moment of my life. You have given language to the visceral truths I brought into this world and have inspired me as a spiritual teacher, an activist, and a human being. My mother gave me the gift of your work as a child, and I've carried it with me all the way to this moment. I practiced saying this to you 1,000 times over 34 years of living, and I also wrote it down just in case, knowing I would regret not telling you of the indelible imprint that you've left on my spirit. I know we only have 30 minutes, and I intend to make the absolute most of them. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do and for being here with me today.
Well, that was so beautiful and meant so much to me. Thank you. I saw some questions that you sent over, so I realize the depth of conversation that you're holding about all this. Don't worry about that 30 minutes. You take what you need. And I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to be here with you. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I know you're passing it along. Whatever you got from me, we all just pass it along. And that's the way it goes. And it's beautiful. And God knows we need to step it up right now. So.
Hello, and thank you for calling the Higher Self Hotline, your direct line to the divine. You've been led here by your inner knowing, and you've arrived right on cue. I'm your host, Zoe Greco, and together we'll make the ethereal earthly, helping you consciously embody your spiritual knowing and most authentic self. Please listen carefully to the following options. To discover how to fulfill your soul's purpose, press 1. To unlock infinite abundance in life, love, and career, press 2. To heal your mind, body, and spirit, press 3. To speak with your personal spirit guides, press 0. Please hold while we connect you to your highest timeline.
Hello, Divine Darlings, and welcome back to the Higher Self Hotline. I'm your host, Zoe Greco. Thank you so much for joining me today. In today's episode, you are about to hear a conversation between myself and, I would say, the single soul that I have most long admired. This is a human being that has left the most indelible mark and imprint on my spirit, has given language to the visceral truths that I came into this world with, and has provided me with hope and clarity as I look forward into this world that feels as though it's all crumbling into dust. Because of her work, I am who I am. And because of her work, I trust in the future of our world and of our spiritual progression. Marianne Williamson is an author, political activist, and longtime leader in spiritually progressive and social justice movements. She's the author of 17 books, including 4 #1 New York Times bestsellers, and is one of America's most recognized public voices, with frequent appearances on The Oprah Winfrey Show, Larry King Live, Good Morning America, and now the Higher Self Hotline. In 1989, she founded Project Angel Food, a Los Angeles-based Meals on Wheels program serving homebound people with life-threatening illnesses. The organization has delivered more than 20 million meals to date. Her work has long focused on poverty, anti-hunger efforts, and racial reconciliation. In 2004, she co-founded the Peace Alliance, advocating for peace-centered public policy. Williamson ran for president of the United States in the 2020 and 2024 Democratic primaries, bringing issues of universal health care, climate change, economic justice, ethical governance, and moral leadership into the national political conversation. Marianne, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to the Higher Self Hotline.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
I would really love to start by asking you, of course, about your political career, your career as a political activist, as a spiritual leader, and we're here also today to discuss your new book, Midlife Awakening, which I'm very excited about. And I'd like to begin with the question about sort of the pivot that you embodied from your position of spiritual leadership into political position. You've spoken about politics as the spiritual and moral work of a society, not something separate from consciousness. From where I sit, your move into politics didn't feel like a shift. It felt like an ethical inevitability. When did it become clear to you that continuing your spiritual work without engaging in the political system was no longer enough?
Well, I saw it and continue to see it the way you just said. I never thought of it as a pivot. When I began nonprofit organizations during the AIDS crisis, I saw that as an extension of the work I was doing teaching the principles of A Course in Miracles. Because the Course in Miracles says this is a practical course. It's all about applying these ideas. It's not enough to just sit around and talk about love. And I think at a certain point, it's not enough only to apply the principles of love in our personal interactions. So when you look at, for instance, I'm a student of American history. We all should be students of American history at this point, let me tell you. I've been fascinated by the role that spiritual and religious sources played in so many of the social justice movements in this country, whether it had to do with abolition or women's suffrage or the civil rights movement. All that the word politics means is of the people. So just as an individual has to ask themselves about any behavior, is this good? Is this the right thing to do? Is this honest? Is it merciful? Is it forgiving? We should be asking that about public policy. All that public policy is our collective behavior, or at least the collective behavior that is funded by our taxpayer dollars. I think as someone who has been in the field of personal growth for so many decades, as does anyone who is in the field of healing, psychotherapy, personal growth, you start to see patterns. And you see when a person is in trouble, you counsel people. You say, if you continue acting that way, you're going to lose your marriage. You're going to continue to act that way, you're going to OD. You continue to act that way, you're going to get sick. And I saw our country moving in directions that, because I work so up close and personal with people, I saw too many people for whom life was too hard. And it was too hard because of economic reasons. It was too hard because of reasons that were directly or indirectly a consequence of unjust public policy. How was I supposed to just pretend that wasn't the case? And I had said for a long time, Zoe, I had said to people in the higher consciousness community, we're the last people who should be sitting this stuff out. We're the last people who should be sitting out these larger economic and political and social questions, because if you know what changes one heart, you know what changes the world. And you also know you are the one who knows that when things are this deeply dysfunctional, something's going to blow. I had always been, because of even the way I was brought up, even in the earliest days of my career, I was someone who considered politics important in my private life. I would hold fundraisers. I would, do what I could. It was that at a certain point, no, it's not enough just to support politicians. You have to call the system on its basic injustices. And that is best done when you have the platform of an actual political campaign.
There's so many points that I would love to touch on in that response, but I think one of the most poignant things that you talked about was when you understand as a practitioner and a person the things that directly impact a heart, that change a heart and change a human. It feels, I think, nearly irresponsible not to try and apply that to the collective. I've often described America as an adolescent boy with a lot of youth and a lot of hubris and overconfidence, and they're not careful. They're not fragile with, those around them. And I see the way that America is overly confident in our abilities. We're boastful without having ever actually done our shadow work or actually ever explored, what has brought us to this pivotal moment where we can go in a direction of love, or in a direction of harm, a direction of healing, or a direction of pain. And you touched on something very important, which is this has felt kind of like a singular line as you move in your career, that, this is something that has been a part of your practice and your work for as long as you've been in this field and in these endeavors. I watched A Better Way, and was so inspired by when you talked about, being a part of the countercultural movement, being in college in the 70s, and you came of age in the 1970s during that countercultural movement, which imagined a multidimensional transformation of consciousness, whether it was through culture or governance. And many people from that generation were eventually absorbed into the very systems that they were there protesting and opposing. But somehow you were able to circumvent that pipeline. What did you refuse to surrender that allowed you to continue to progress in that direction?
I think that the timeline is a little earlier than you mentioned. I think a lot of this has to do with the 1960s, and particularly the assassinations of the two Kennedys and Dr. King in the 1960s. When I was in college, and I first went to college in 1970, we would read Ram Dass and Alan Watts in the morning, and then we would go to Vietnam anti-war protests in the afternoon. There was no sense of someone needing to, quote unquote, stay in your lane, because there weren't lanes. It was recognized that just as we are multidimensional people, it's a multidimensional society. So it was a countercultural time moving into the 70s as well. And it was sex, it was music, it was politics, it was culture, it was everything. The ultimate result of those assassinations, however, a real, as you can imagine, a generational trauma set in. We weren't using words like PTSD, but it certainly was when our heroes were shot and killed in front of our eyes. And things split at that time. A lot of people went the more traditional political route. A lot of people went the more spiritual transformational route. And that was an unfortunate divorce, because each of those two sort of felt disdain towards the other. Now, I just never got the memo. I never got the memo, So I think really that's a simple way to put it. I never got that memo.
I, as I've shared with you off camera, I am a devout reader and follower of your work. I've probably listened to A Return to Love once a year, every year for my entire life. And as I grew up, thank you. And as I grew up, I had the benefit and opportunity of exploring more of your work, like A Politics of Love and Healing the Soul of America. And, these books I think are imperatively important during this time in human history where people are terrified and they feel, in their own words, weird. They feel weird living their everyday lives in the face of the deconstruction of the reality in which they, were reared and the paradigm that they understand. They don't know how to reconcile the existence that they're living in and the personal experience that they're having. And I really believe that your work is the answer. Personally, I have been you can ask Lauren. I've been quite dogmatic about trying to have this conversation because I really believe that your voice is, if not among the most important that we can be tuning into during this particular time. And so I'm curious to understand more about the connection between politics and love in your definition as it is defined in A Course in Miracles. Love is a value that people are comfortable with privately, but they're very uncomfortable when it challenges power, profit, and control. And so I'm curious if there was a moment when you realized that bringing love and moral clarity into politics wouldn't just be misunderstood, but would be actively resisted.
Well, for me, when I started writing my book, Healing the Soul of America, I was interested in the intersection of spirituality and politics. But as I began to learn more, I realized that this was certainly not a wheel we had to reinvent. I began to read Gandhi. I began to read Dr. King, and I realized that spirituality within a political context had already been articulated by Gandhi in the principles of political nonviolence. And then Martin Luther King traveled to India, and he took those principles, he brought them back to the United States for application to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. When I ran for president in 2020, I was given my ethical and legal do by the Democratic Party. I was a minor candidate. Yeah, we have to let her on stage, but we'll put her over on the side. But however begrudgingly they did, I felt for a minor candidate. I was, I was on MSNBC enough. I was on CNN enough. I was given a CNN town hall, and I was in 2 debates. So I actually thought that I got my message out. I had an opportunity. In 2024, I entered the scene expecting the same, and that was my naivete. I don't think that the suppression, the invisibilization, and the peripheralization of my candidacy in 2024 by that system was due to the spirituality of my message. It was due to the fact that there had been a decision made. And that decision was, we are going to nominate Biden. We are not going to have a primary. A few people, this is what's so ridiculous. This was just like a handful of people. And the traditional Democratic voters seemed to think these guys knew what they were doing. And they said that Donald Trump's threat to democracy was so great that they felt entitled to suppress democracy in that race. Therefore, I don't think it was my spirituality. I think it was that somebody attended my announcement and called the White House and told somebody there. In fact, I know that happened, and said, she knows how to energize a crowd. They used my spirituality to create the absurd narrative, the doppelganger. She's a kooky, she's woo-woo, she's whatever, to make sophisticated people think, oh, you can't listen to her, you can't listen to her, you can't listen to her. It's really a character assassination. And yes, it was done in ways that I don't think they would have been able to do had I been a man, and or one of their, colleagues within their system. But we are where we are right now. And even though that explains things that happened in the past, I think our attention needs to be on what is and what is not happening right this very second.
You even answered some of my future questions in that response. And I questioned myself whether I would be willing to say this, and you can tell me if you would like me to change it after. But it has astounded me as a young adult. Donald Trump was first elected the year I got married, which, by the way, the day that he was elected, I did not want to live. And there was a video that you posted that supported my desire to keep moving. You told us that we needed to pray for him. You told us that this was the will, this was the way, and that this decision had been made, and the best thing that we could do was pray for him. And I can say that it quite literally saved my life. But over the last decade, when we've been living under this regime, it has astounded me that a lifelong political activist and spiritual leader, a multi-time New York Times bestseller, was not given the same respect or space as, at best, a convicted felon, failed businessman, bigot, misogynist, racist, ableist, reality television star, at best. It has been confusing.
Well, I don't, for myself, think that the comparison to Donald Trump is as meaningful as, why wasn't I given the same attention as a Vivek Ramaswamy or an Andrew Yang? That's where it got to me. And I also think that in the Republican Party, ironically enough, the Republicans have the very elitist policies, but a strangely more egalitarian relationship to their own base. For instance, even like when you and I were talking about the CNN town halls the other day, when my poll numbers were actually higher than the Vivek Ramaswamy's or Chris Christie, they were given their town halls. So the complicity, what I call a political media industrial complex, was truly something abhorrent. And of course, a lot of this, though, we have to ask ourselves, what was going on in the mind of traditional Democratic voters? Now, part of what was going on in their mind was, if you don't see somebody, if you're a Democratic voter and you don't see someone on CNN or you don't see someone on MSNBC, you really don't realize they're a candidate. And if you have people like George Stephanopoulos saying, well, she's just a message campaign, really, what are people supposed to think? But there were others who I think should have known better. When they were saying things like, we don't primary incumbent presidents. Well, excuse me, Eugene McCarthy and Bobby Kennedy Sr. primaried Johnson. McCarthy doing so well in New Hampshire is what made Johnson drop out, and so forth. So these narratives and the doppelganger that was created, I think that sometimes people on the left, Democrats, like to think, oh, they're a cult, but we're not. This was a level of cult thinking. We've got to do it. This is the DNC says it's got to be Biden, and people really should have thought about that, especially when I think people who did hear me, and this is evidenced by the votes I did get, I gave a very cogent argument, I think, for the idea that Biden would not win, and that the Democratic Party was simply not addressing the deeper anger and frustration of the American people, and that this would be very dangerous for us on Election Day. And I'm sorry to say I was absolutely right.
Well, I think anyone that is truly conscious or awakened or paying attention would have agreed with you. I know I did. And by the way, I did get to vote for you, which was very exciting. And one of the thrills and honors of my life, I saved my sticker. I almost wore it today, but I decided not to.
Thank you.
Of course.
That means a lot to me. Well, almost 500,000 people did. And I think given that the campaign was so invisibilized, what that says to me is that most people who heard me voted for me.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, after I believe it was your first 2020 debate, you were the most Googled name in 49 states. People were listening. People cared about what you had to say. And it was actually in that moment, as a young adult, that I became completely disillusioned and disenchanted with the Democratic Party. As a lifelong liberal, raised in, a very liberal home, it was in that moment that I realized it's rigged on both sides. And the political media industrial complex absolutely came after you because, in my opinion, you were too honest, too woman, and too advanced for this particular moment in human history. Not only are the systems working against us, but the consciousness of humanity has not risen to a place that I think that they could fully receive you. Now, given more exposure, space, and time, I believe that they could, but it was cut off.
I think that's an important distinction, though, Zoe. I don't think the problem is with the consciousness of the American people. The problem is with the regressive political, economic, social, and media systems that have suppressed conversations over which they had no control. Because I've traveled this country and I've had a career of over 40 years. People are not stupid, and the American people are decent, and the American people can handle an adult conversation if you have it with them. But there are so many layers of obfuscation. No, you can't listen to that. No, don't listen to that. Don't listen to that. No, you're a smart person. You wouldn't listen to that. So that's, I think, an example of the larger problem that we have on the earth. I think people all over this world are downloading the required understanding if we're to make the evolutionary leap that we need to make to get off the trajectory of species suicide. That's, to me, the potential tragedy of this moment. All over this world, in our country, but also around the world, there are geniuses who are already demonstrating best practices. How could we do energy? How could we do the environment? How could we do housing? How could we do economics? How could we do food? How could we do government? How could we do economic systems? The problem is not that we don't have the answers. The answers, however, are a challenge to the prevailing, primarily 20th century focused perspectives that too many people holding the levers of power think we cannot do without and believe that it is their responsibility to protect. So we have two parallel universes right now. One world is falling apart. One world is struggling to be born. And I think we have to think of ourselves as both death doulas to the old and birth doulas to the new. I think going back to the spiritual element, the Dalai Lama said, in order to save the world, we must have a plan, but no plan will work unless we meditate. The guidance that we need at this point in order to move forward and create a realm of possibility in what is otherwise a very, very dark time is more than anything to be received within. There's nobody who's going to be sending you an email telling you what to do now.
You know, for me, you have been a voice of reason during this time. It's when it's felt like everyone around you is starting to, and especially in the spiritual community, I've noticed that it's not really a spectrum, but a circle in which you can become so far extreme that you end up coming right back around the other side. And you have maintained this level-headed clarity that I believe comes from your spiritual background and the morality that you embody and bring to the world. I'm curious to understand from your perspective in this season in which we can imagine that, you know, especially America, let's say, is in a cocoon. And just as the caterpillar dissolves to reveal those imaginal cells to be born into the butterfly, what can we be focused on? What collectively can we be allowing to be dismantled? And what can we be bringing our attention to in order to support this other world in being born?
I think it's a collective wave of participatory regeneration. It's time for that imaginal goop to become a butterfly quickly. And it's an immune system. And each of us should think of ourselves as immune cells. Now, the cells in the body are all directed through their own internal natural intelligence. You to the pancreas, you to the lungs, you to the bone. Each and every one of us, it depends on where you live. It depends on your community. It depends on your tribe. To wake up every morning. How can I help? How can I serve? Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to whom? Dear God, I don't want to sit out this moment on the planet. I want to be as of greatest use as possible. And when that is your prayer, things start to happen. Stupid things will be of less interest to you. You won't find yourself scrolling and reading ridiculous, stupid things like that so often occupy us, particularly when we're nervous, right? You will start to realize that this is not a moment of a soloist leadership model. It's a choir leadership model. That's the zeitgeist of this moment. No one has a more important part than anyone else. No matter who you are, you're in a congressional district. No matter who you are in this country, you have 2 senators. Read up. Know what's going on, whether it's my Substack, someone else's, Heather Cox Richardson. No, part of nonviolent political philosophy is educating ourselves. And when you were talking earlier about how people are finding it hard to reconcile, well, you know what, Zoe? Tough. That's really, we have to toughen up and grow up. Even you said something earlier. You had told me you were 34. And then you said you were a young adult. You're actually not a young adult.
I am not a young adult. I meant when I was a young adult 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because we have to rise now and recognize that this is as serious a time as anything that our parents, our grandparents, or our great-grandparents experienced. And I am less afraid of what the opponents to democracy are bringing at us, and I am deeply concerned. We should all be deeply concerned. But I'm most concerned about any vestiges of complacency, which amounts to passive complicity of too many of us. You know, in a moment when you feel this is difficult, do it anyway. This is not a moment that any of us can afford to sit out. And if you ask, how can I be of help? And you get online, you'll see things happening in your neighborhood, in your city, in your town, in your tribe. Keep it nonviolent. Pray and meditate in the morning so that you take care of your own nervous system, which is your container. Make sure of that. Bless the whole world. I always say pray in the morning, kick ass in the afternoon. Yes. We can't do ditzy. We can't do ditzy. I don't know what to do. And we have to be, I think, strong with one another. We've become too precious. Like my trauma. Oh, you think your trauma's bad? That's nothing compared to the trauma all of us are going to feel within the next 5 years if we don't handle things right now. You don't even know what trauma is. Most of us are. So I think that this is time to stand up and rise up. And if you really want to know what to do, get online. I said to one woman once, oh, you don't know what to do? Because I have seen you get online. There was a 34B, Donna Karen, 1982, pearl encrusted bustier, and you weren't going to stop until you found it. Don't tell me you don't know how to Google. Don't tell me you don't know how to look for ways that you can be abused.
What you're saying feels so important as someone who does personal transformational work with others. This idea that I see the same thing happening on a collective scale, this perceived helplessness of we can't change. And I see this on an individual scale constantly, this idea of I'm broken. I can't be fixed. I can't be resolved. This idea that we'll just roll over and take it. And I think that's the thing that I have long so admired about you is the fact that, even in listening to A Return to Love, I've always admired like the honesty, the rawness, like a little bit of irreverence that you speak with. Like you're a real human being. You're a spiritual being, but you help ground us. And politics is the grounded practice of consciousness. It's what we do here on the earth. So the idea of taking the personal experience, doing our personal work, shining that light into the collective, allowing that to ripple out into the world is the most important thing we can be doing. And when you were speaking, it made me think about the fact that, we each are imbued with this powerful intuition that we're taught by this same system that wants us to feel helpless to ignore. But our intuition is the part of each of us that tells each of us where we belong in the system. I had a thought just yesterday, or maybe the day before when I was gassing myself up for this conversation, because let me tell you, I've almost thrown up for like 3 days with excitement and nerves to talk to you. I thought to myself, holy shit, I could be president. Like I could run for president. Marianne Williamson ran for president.
Good for you, Zoe. I've been sitting here for the last 10 minutes saying, God, I hope she's going to run for something. Get started. Get started. You're 34.
I'm eligible next year when I'm 35.
You don't have to run for president right away. You can run for something. Or, and I'm not telling you, maybe your guidance will not be to run for office, but I hope that you will continue with the messaging that you're giving. And, I'm honored to have played any part whatsoever in your working this through, but you have your own audience and your own work to do. I think that's really, I think that it is true of many people right now. We're already placed. Just step it up. Step it up. This is an urgent moment, and the window will close if enough of us don't step up. And I know that that's difficult to hear, but I think it's important.
You've actually answered, I think, the central question that I wanted to ask today, and then we're about to transition to discuss your book briefly. But I have to say, I have been so transformed by witnessing your courage to stand on stages and debate next to people who were given so much more space and respect, and to stand up to the memification of your existence, to go from being a truly respected and beloved being in, the bubble of, spiritual progression, to take that and try to apply it into a space where you had to fight to be respected and seen. It has impacted me so deeply. And so I wanted to ask you today, for anyone listening, for anyone who believes that they could be a Marianne Williamson, what would you tell them? And I believe your answer is step it up, like get busy, get going.
I hope that some of what I went through will inspire women particularly to know that it's not enough to just speak your truth. If you see another woman speaking hers, damn it, show up for her. Because what happened in my case was, okay, they make you radioactive. It makes other women fear, well, if I say, actually, I agree with her, they'll make me radioactive. And that, I think, when someone would lie about me, that would not hurt me as much as did the silence of those who knew the truth about me. One tweet, I've worked for her for 20 years, and that's not the way she is. Whatever. And that, I hope, is something that we all learn from. You know, you were talking before about the 1970s. In the 1970s, when we were having all these consciousness raising feminist sessions and stuff, feminism in that wave of things was understood to include the primacy of sisterhood. It was understood none of us are getting there unless all of us get there. So, by the way, even when we're talking about a woman going forward, have your sisters around you before you saunter out there. And they'll say, oh, of course I'll support you. See, that's another word. We use it to, oh, I really support you. Oh, really? Because I haven't seen a check. Oh, really? Because I haven't seen you post about it. Oh, really? You support me? Because I haven't seen any video content that you made about it. So talk to people before you go out there and say, if I do this, it will be hard. Will you be to my right? Will you be to my left? Will you be in front of me and you'll be behind me? And they'll say, oh, of course we will. No, let me ask you again.
I'm having a religious experience right now, sister. Holy shit.
In front of you too, until enough of us are doing it, etc. We really have to get very, very serious. And that was my mistake. I sauntered in 24, naively assuming that I would be given some of the same platform opportunities that I had in 2020. I did not expect the cannonballs that were coming after me. And that was my mistake. That was my naivete. And I have my own things to look at about, people that should not have been left in the room. I was warned by the FBI, etc. We got to be real grown-ups now, but we can do it. And I hope that failure teaches you just like success does. And other people's failure teaches you just like success does. And so, you hope that whatever you went through might make you a better person and make someone else a little bit wiser. And, that's how we all grow together.
You are the baddest baddie on the planet. I will never. I mean, yeah, you're one of the greats. So with all of that said, I do want to touch on your book because even as a coach myself who works with people, and also entering my own midlife, right? Like this is.
No, you're not yet, Zoe.
They say 35 is midlife. I don't make the rules. I Googled it.
No.
Oh, first I'm not a young adult. Then I'm not in my midlife. How old am I, Marianne?
Just enjoy being young and don't even think about it until you're menopausal. Okay. Don't even think about it. You got a long way to go.
I support women from their early 20s to their mid 60s.
For that reason, I think it's a good idea for you to read the book. Thank you.
Absolutely. I already have. I was gifted a copy. Thank you very much. And, obviously the political landscape is one that I'm very activated about. But in reading this book, I felt so much more prepared for the work that I've already been doing because I felt like I could understand it from an even higher perspective. And right. To identify, in Midlife Awakening, you describe midlife as a moment when illusion falls away and we're no longer willing to live unconsciously or betray our deeper knowing. And to be honest with you, I see this occurring in people younger and younger and younger and younger and younger. There is something happening where we're not getting to, our 50s and going, why did I climb this corporate ladder? I hate it. We're getting to our 30s and going, wait, I don't want to climb this ladder. And it's so important.
Stands on the shoulders of the one before it.
Exactly. So you frame it as a spiritual initiation, our midlife point versus a decline, which it has been historically viewed to be. What do you believe midlife is actually asking of us now, not just personally, but collectively as we show up in the world?
Well, we're talking about nothing less critical than the survival of the species at this point. So women of childbearing age are going to be necessary if that's to happen. But I think that if we don't produce more wisdom, then no matter how many children are born, the species still won't make it. So I think as we pass through our childbearing age, or even if, women of childbearing ages just don't feel that their dharma, their assignment this lifetime is to have children, doesn't matter. Our consciousness is the womb out of which we conceive and become pregnant with the new humanity, as it were. So some things, the older you are, the more you know. Some things, the younger you are, the more you know. In the Talmud, it says every generation has its own wisdom. Every generation has its own experience that informs it. I think it's really been to the detriment of all of us that we have so separated ourselves out. This religion, this sex, this gender, this sexuality, this tribe, this ethnicity, and now it's this generation. Adults need to show up now, whether you're 18 or 80. And so I think that whoever we are, finding that deeper wisdom, which is not obscured by so many of the prejudices and false beliefs of an age that is now passing away, so that we can show up raw, honest, authentic, just as human beings who would like to see the species repair itself, the planet repair, and for us to create a sustainable evolutionary path for the human race. Find that. And I don't know how you do it without meditation, without prayer, without deep reflection. Because otherwise your mind is just so corrupted by the thought forms that dominate popular culture. So it's an integrative approach that we need. It's our bodies and our souls. It's just like physical healing. It's body, mind, and spirit. And I think that applies to civilization as well. We have to look to deep within, and we have to look to the kind of activism we have to take on the outside. It's both and. And I think each of us will find the role that we can best play in serving the larger collective, regenerative, resurrective process out of which we emerge reborn as a species.
This conversation has really highlighted for me the way that our society functions to drive us to feel special, to build some sense of identity and to individuate, but not to be self-focused in the way that we actually come to truly know ourselves and our purpose. We see ourselves as needing to be separate in order to stand out and stand on others so that we can rise to the top as an individual, when in reality, the only way we should be thinking about ourselves as an individual is in, our own self-reflection and self-work, but then taking that self-work and reflection and shining that light into the collective and focusing on communal support and communal efforts. Am I understanding you?
Absolutely. Well, and a lot of this has, of course, an economic basis. The foundational principle for the United States was supposed to be that the government would broker individual liberty, which includes economic liberty, with a concern for the common good. That's supposed to be the balance. The way capitalism has unfolded over the last few decades, there was such an emphasis, even supported by government in too many cases, on private sector profitability as opposed to keeping it balanced. So it's one thing to say, yes, we support you in building that factory. We support you in the jobs you're going to create. We support you in all the ways you're going to benefit the town you're in. But no, you cannot spew those toxins into the river that are going to give cancer to the people downriver. It's supposed to be both and. And I don't think, I know Mamdani said something the other day to leave behind rugged individualism and go for the warmth of collectivism. I think that's just going from one unbalanced position to another.
Yes.
Rugged individualism has become rugged narcissism. And you were right that that's been cultivated for the economic gain of those who feed on that. You thinking you need I need this, as opposed to what do we need. But I think that we're all seeing these things so we can come back to the middle. That yes, my that it is a high characterological strength of the American, that we're going to do it, and we're entrepreneurial, I want to go do it. And that is a beautiful thing about us. But it should not and must not be at the expense of other people or the expense of other people's good. And that's what we're all working out right now. And that's what people are thinking through and realizing. In that sense, this is an important moment. The Course in Miracles says it's not up to you whether you learn it says it's not up to you what you learn. It's merely up to you whether you learn through joy or through pain. These are things, as you mentioned earlier, we should have been talking about for the last several years. And the system has sought to peripheralize and visibilize and suppress the voices of anyone who wanted to have the deeper conversations. But remember, when I was growing up, you had Martin Luther King, you had Bobby Kennedy Sr., you had people who were having the deeper conversations. Now they don't shoot them; they just character assassinate.
They destroy their reputations. Exactly. It used to cost you your life, and now it costs you your reputation.
That's right. And now have it anyway. And that's there's a line in the Bible: "What man intends for evil, God intends for good." Good can come from this, but we have to work hard and not be lazy, and support each other. And, best, what do they say? Friends don't let friends drive drunk. Friends don't let friends sit this out. Get up, get out of bed. We're going to a protest. Get up. I don't want to.
Thank you so much. My last and final question for you is, how can we use a midlife awakening to activate deeper levels of reflection and consciousness to find our position, to be able to move forward?
The quiet mind. The quiet mind knows what to do. So many times we're so busy in this culture, but we're running around like chickens with our head chopped off. Once again, mindfulness, meditation, prayer, anything that aligns your nervous system with what is called in both Christianity and Judaism, the small, still voice within. Seek that internal guidance. And it's the only way you're going to know how to navigate the outer world right now is to ask for internal guidance. It's so chaotic out there. And there are so many people trying to fool you. And there's so many forces that are obscuring and obfuscating and confusing. Go within first, even 5 minutes in the morning, and then you'll be ready to face it. And you're going to have dimensions of wisdom and power and recognition that you would not have if you just woke up in the morning and immediately went to social media.
Marianne Williamson, holy cow. You're speaking words to me. I've listened to you on these headphones. They're secret. You can't see them. For years. And now the words that you're speaking are actually to me. And it's a crazy moment. Besides in my own personal library, where can we find your books, your work? Where can listeners follow you and engage with you?
Thank you. Marianne.com for my spiritual Course in Miracles classes and so forth. My Substack, mariannewilliamson.substack.com for my continuous commentary. And of course, I'm on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all that, like everybody else.
You're also quite active on Threads. I get to see all your comments that you leave.
Yeah, I just wherever on any given moment, I'll go, well, let's post it there. I think that's really what we're all doing right now, Zoe. Just flood the field. Just flood the field. Flood the field.
I love it. I love your comments on Threads. I like every single one.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, blessed babes. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode. And I would love if we could take a moment to send this week's subject, Marianne Williamson, some love, sweetness, and positivity as she continues to illuminate our path back to love as individuals and as a whole. If you're interested in being on the podcast, send an email to podcast@zoegreco.com. Connect with me on all socials at the Zoe Greco. And of course, I want to conclude by reminding you that you are important, you matter, and you are perfect exactly as you are. I love you. Your spirit guides love you. Marianne Williamson loves you, and the universe loves you. So until next time, keep answering the call of your higher self. Bye, friends.
And Zoe, yes, may I?
Please.
If you ever feel like moving forward in the political realm, please let me know. I'd be glad to do what I could to share whatever information I might have.
This is the greatest moment of my life. I can't even tell you.